We're going to get started. Thank you for joining us. We've got a webinar today on Microsoft Clarity, and um, today we've got Colin Lee in from Seattle, who's the product manager of Microsoft Clarity. So we're quite excited to have him, and he'll be going through kind of the bulk of the content. During the presentation, if there's any questions, just feel free to put them in the chat. And then once we get to the end, we'll be able to answer those and perhaps take some live questions as well. Right before we get started, we've got quite a lot of our partners that we work with in digital marketing agencies and a number that don't. So I'll give just a really brief introduction to Diginius and how we work with agencies. So we run, in conjunction with Microsoft Advertising, a partner program for PPC agencies,
Hello?
and we work with about 1,000 agencies globally in over 60 countries. And with that, we provide technology, dedicated analysts to get better performance out of Microsoft, and financial incentives for clients and agencies, vouchers and so forth to start new accounts. And then we have a referral program where we can refer business to our agency partners. So with that, I'll turn it over to Colin to kind of go through Clarity and how we use that. We use it quite a lot at Diginius to get performance, kind of, because it does a lot of things that Google Analytics doesn't do.
Hello, is this
So yeah,
working?
Colin, over to you.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Nate, for that quick intro. Hey, everybody, today I'll be just covering how to engage your users with AI-powered analytics. So giving a brief overview of what behavioral analytics are, what Clarity is, and how you can use that to really drive some business value. So just a little bit more about myself. Like Nate mentioned, I am a product manager on Clarity. And so I am primarily focused on improving our product experience for users like yourself. In my day-to-day, I actually use Clarity all the time. We have a project called Clarity on Clarity. And so we're also users of the product and seeing how we can improve our own website and landing pages. So with that, let's jump into the content. So during my time at the company, I often just speak with people like yourself, doing the classic PM job of trying to understand what are the pain points, what are the questions, or what are some user frustrations that digital marketers have. And from these conversations, kind of three key themes have emerged. The first is, can I really understand the whole user experience and then make improvements? So you may have questions like, how are visitors really engaging with my landing page, or what sections of the page are my users most or least interested in? The second is really understanding the key conversions or the key actions that users take once they're on your website. So how is my ad campaign, or why is my ad campaign underperforming? Are the key conversions going down, for instance? Or how can I optimize my purchase funnel and really increase those conversions there? And then the third is really going that next step and understanding how to get real insights and recommendations to then make improvements based off of how users are kind of interacting with their website. And so good news is that behavioral analytics is a solution for all three of these points. But before we dive in further, I just want to quickly go through kind of what behavioral analytics is and how it differs from traffic analytics or kind of GA4, as you may be familiar with. So for traffic analytics, this is great if you ever wondered kind of questions like, what was my bounce rate, or how many pages per session do I average? Maybe how many sessions overall do I average, or is my site performance? And the problem here is that there's kind of so much data that these pieces of software are giving you. And all this data is in the form of numbers. And so these numbers can really only get you so far in really understanding how this reflects true user experience. There's just no additional information or context. And so for me, I sometimes start in the data and the analytics, but whenever I really want to dig deeper and kind of come to meaningful insights, that's when I jump to behavior analytics. And so if anything, sometimes you may be left with more questions than answers, like why, for example, has my bounce rate gone up? What does that really mean? And so in contrast to traffic analytics, I like behavioral analytics because, again, you can actually see the user's interactions in a visual way and really understand how they're navigating an app or website. So in Clarity, we kind of do this in a few key ways. First is like the session replay. And so this shows you like what parts of the page users are scrolling to, where are they clicking. Heat maps is almost a snapshot or a screenshot of a given website, and then shows you like what are the most interacted with elements. And so there's a saying that a picture speaks 1,000 words, and we have a saying in Clarity that a heat map can provide 1,000 different insights. And so then with this information, I can then start to connect the dots between what my traffic numbers are saying and then the underlying user actions. And then kind of on top of all this is where the exciting work with Copilot and large language models are really making this whole process even easier. But diving deeper into like what is a session replay even? So in this scenario, this is a company and they're looking at their landing page. And so the whole point is to really take a deep look at a specific user's behavior across a given session. So really uncovering the pain points, watching the user journey, and identifying some product opportunities. And so here is just a quick screenshot of what a recording can look like. You can see the users clicking on different elements, where their mouses are moving, and how they're scrolling on a page. And so recordings are essentially a playback of all of these different users' interactions, and is really the foundation of how Clarity thinks that we believe analytics can be different, right? Because you're actually seeing where users are clicking, where they're scrolling. And also, I would say that this is great because there's no bias, right? If you're running like a usability study, sometimes the candidates feel like they're being watched, and so they would act in ways in which they don't normally do. And this can lead to sometimes inconclusive or skewed results. But when looking at session replays, you're actually seeing the customers as they really navigate through your site. And so you get much more meaningful and representative samples. So now moving on to heat maps, I guess the scenario that I like to use for heat maps is kind of A/B testing a new website layout, for example. And so we're really zooming out here into user behavior in aggregates or across all users. And so on the left here, this is our click heat map. And so this will show you, what parts of the page are users really clicking on the most. And then on the right is something called a scroll heat map. And so this shows you how far down on average users are really scrolling on the page. And so scroll is really useful for making sure that users are really seeing the content that you want them to. Like say, for example, there's a particular call to action or some copy that you realize only 20% of your users are even seeing. That's a huge loss right there. And so you'd really want to then figure out ways to get users to scroll down more, or maybe even place that part of the page just higher up on the screen, more towards the right area. And so when we were actually redesigning our homepage for Clarity, we made sure to keep all the key call to actions, so like get started, see the live demo, all of that above the folds to really encourage users to interact with the website. And you can see that was reflected in the actual click heat map because all the most clicked elements are actually above the folds. And so like this kind of level of insight and making these UI changes isn't necessarily something you can easily gain from just looking at the numbers alone. And one new heat map we actually just released this week is called the attention heat map. And so this is essentially just looking at time spent. So what parts of the page are users spending the most time on? And so interestingly for Clarity, actually the very top of the page wasn't necessarily the most place where the most time was spent, but actually a little bit below the top where we kind of lay out the key features of Clarity. So users are kind of stuck there looking through the different options of what Clarity is providing. And so Clarity also provides like more traditional metrics dashboard, but I specifically want to call out our behavioral metrics, right? So there is still a little bit of a gap between that pure recording information, heat maps, and then the traffic information. And so what we try to do with these behavioral metrics is really kind of create a category in the middle to blend the two. And so you may be really wondering, well, how do I quantify user behavior or user frustration? And so Clarity has a few metrics. One is called rage clicks. And so this is whenever a user kind of clicks on the website in quick succession. I feel like we've all been there. When something's not loading or something's frustrated, you just kind of spam that mouse. This will then be reflected in clarity. Dead clicks occur when a user clicks, but then there's no effect or no page change or nothing really happens. Again, this can be an indication that a user was expecting something to happen, but then that was not reflected in the actual website itself. Excessive scrolling is essentially just whenever a user is scrolling more than expected. So whether that's they're kind of scrolling up and down trying to find a piece of information or for whatever the reason may be, we will call this out specifically. And then finally, quick backs is just whenever a user quickly goes to a new page and then returns. And so the real power of this is then you can add these specific user interactions as filters to help narrow the scope of the recordings and heat maps. So then you can do all your analysis, let's say just for recordings where a rage click occurred, and this will really help you find these key insights. So now that we have just a general understanding of what behavioral analytics is and some of the key features of behavioral analytics, I'd love to just explain how some real users have leveraged Clarity to then make some meaningful improvements. And then after that, we can dive into like the future of analytics and how AI is playing a big part in what Clarity is doing and in analytics more generally. So on that first bucket of really understanding user behavior, there is this company, Overfuel. They essentially help car dealerships build better websites. And so they use a standard website layout across multiple dealerships. So they're more of an agency. And they were really trying to understand two things. One is trying to optimize the mobile experience because they noticed that there was some user struggle happening. And then they had an assumption that a third-party plugin was actually causing a poor user experience and a lot of drop-off, but they wanted to validate that and actually see for themselves. And so they use Clarity to solve both of these problems. So on the first part, they use the session recordings to again zoom in, get that front row view of the user journey. And what they noticed was that kind of about 25% of all homepage activity, users were actually just navigating to this hamburger menu on the top right. And the reason for that was they wanted to go to the search bar and search for a specific, car, model, what have you. And so this was a signal to Overfuel that the users were coming to the website to search, but this wasn't immediately available to users when they got to the landing page. There was this unnecessary step of friction, which was the hamburger menu. And so this insight actually led Overfuel to add search bar front and center to their new homepage experience. And as a result of this change, the hamburger menu then dropped down to the fifth most clicked element, while the search bar actually became the number one most clicked element. And so they then used heat maps to verify the changes, and they can see that the search bar was the number one most clicked element. And so this kind of this play between the recordings, finding insights, implementing changes, and then using heat maps to validate these changes is kind of a common flow we see a lot of our users do. And to the second part, in terms of validating the assumptions, so they noticed that there was a high percentage of rage clicks occurring, which then prompted them to look deeper into the user behaviors. And so then when looking at the heat maps, they noticed that the close button on this kind of third-party chat pop-up was receiving a large number of rage clicks. And this was actually because the pop-up itself was broken and prevented users from clicking this lead form. And so this just prompted Overfuel to make the change here, make this fix, and then ultimately make improvements to that checkout flow. So the next one is conversions more specifically. And when talking with digital marketers, I'm sure the end goal or the key conversions are probably the most important metrics to be tracking. But it is pretty hard to understand kind of why or how users are or are not converting. And so by combining this pure conversion data with the behavior analytics, you can then obviously make these improvements. So taking deeper into how Clarity itself can really tap into this conversion information, we have our event tracking or something we call smart events. So, in a website, there are kind of so many signals and site actions. So even for clarity, for example, we have sign in, login buttons, we have learn mores, we have our live demo, and users can reach these different places on the page, or these different actions in multiple places. And so it is pretty hard to have one single, source of truth metric. But that's how we then landed on smart events, which lets you essentially just group together, button clicks or page visits into a single trackable metric. And there's kind of two ways in which you can do this. There's a um, clarity feature where we actually automatically detect these most important events, and then we'll create these groups for you. So there's literally no work that needs to be done on your part. But then you can also go in and customize smart events as well to be very specific to a particular flow or use case or scenario. And this whole process is, again, no code. So we wanted to make it as simple as possible. And our users are also very interested in these smart events and the ability to track them. Um, and then from these smart events, you can then quickly access the heat maps or recordings to, again, act as almost a filter for specific recordings where, for example, a form submit occurs. And then built on top of these smart events is the funnel. So essentially, can you build the entire end-to-end flow from, let's say, landing page to product page to checkout? And again, with funnels, this whole process involves zero code. So really much a focus on kind of simplicity and user experience. And so kind of moving towards the last bucket of how can I actually improve my site design? There really are a few ways in which at Clarity, we've been leveraging Copilot AI to, one, really surface key user behavior insights. And then on top of that is provide recommendations on how to actually improve the site. So a problem that I've heard many times from Clarity users is that, these analytics, provide a lot of value. They like using Clarity. But one is they just don't have enough time to sit down and watch a ton of recordings that are 10 minutes long. Or once they kind of understand what the user struggles are, they're not really sure what improvements to actually make. What are the next steps? And so this is where we're leveraging Copilot. So there are a few key features that are already available to use in Clarity today, some that we are working on actively. But the first one I'll touch on is our session insights feature. And in my mind, this is almost like the perfect use case for AI Copilot. So a recording, like we've seen, is essentially just a collection of a ton of data points. Some are important, some aren't, but you have, the scroll information or the click information or the page information. And on top of that, these sessions can be very long. So then if you want to kind of analyze all of these users' interactions across 5, 10, 20 sessions, that only just grows the amount of complexity. Well, luckily, we have Copilot. And Copilot is able to understand all the information and then make meaningful connections, providing short summaries. And so in this case, this is a group session insight. So we have grouped together, it's called 10 sessions, and then try to get insights across all of them. And so at the top, we have the successful achievements. And so this will essentially call out what did the user complete? What were they able to do? And so the highlight here is, a user explored different workout routines, and then they actually found suitable powerlifting program. The second part is the unsuccessful attempts. And so calling out areas of user struggle, for example. And so here you see some users experienced difficulty inputting data into the calculator. So some difficulty inputting information into the form fields. And then the key takeaways, this is more of like the conclusion aspect of it, or some key recommendations. And so here, the recommendation is to provide some clearer instructions and tooltips for the input fields to help users navigate this process. And so I think like this is really, really cool in terms of clarity. The Copilot is taking dozens of sessions, sometimes up to an hour in length, and then really understanding and then summarizing these actions. And so just seeing it, how it works is in the top right, you can summarize the list of recordings. And then very quickly, you'll just get that list of recordings. There are also some annotations to it. So if you want to kind of verify a specific recording, you can then go to the actual raw data of the raw recording and then kind of view that yourself as well. And then we also have these insights for heat maps. So again, heat maps are best for looking at user behavior more generally. But when you do this and really zoom out, again, this increases the amount of information that is being collected or shown in a given heat map. And so by leveraging the heat map insights, we're able to look at all the information from across devices, across all the different types of heat maps, then really pull out the key pieces of information to really show where users are frustrated with your website. And maybe, for example, how is your mobile experience compared to the desktop experience? This is something that is also called out as well. And so you can see here, this is that GymGeek example, and we're just providing those insights here. And so just want to wrap up with a case study again of the Clarity Insights features in action. So GymGeek, they are a website that provides some workout programs and guides, and their goals for using Clarity was just overall improve engagement, and then increasing the time spent on their website. But however, the team at GymGeek is pretty small, and so they had a limited amount of time and resources to again do this CRO process. And so they leveraged the Session Insights feature to help them with this. And so actually, there were a couple of recommendations from the insights, which made meaningful improvements, which is really cool. So first was recommended adding an interactive tool to the bottom of each plan. This tool being like a calorie calculator. And after looking at the heat maps to validate what happens, this actually became the most clicked like elements on the page. The second one was adding a quiz to the end of a workout routine page. This again was a suggestion from the insight. And this was completely new. And then again, became one of the most clicked parts of the page. And so as a result, the time spent across all pages increased 31%, which is pretty cool. And again, this is just the beginning of kind of Copilot and Clarity. So I guess looking towards the future, right now, like Clarity started out with our core heat maps recordings features. And that really just shows you what is happening. With these initial Copilot features we've launched, that is starting to look at not only what is happening, but kind of why things are happening as well. And also just more of summarization features. Looking forward, we really are looking at how can we provide even more value and accuracy when it comes to the why, and really providing that key insight into what specific user behaviors are causing a drop in conversions, and then maybe pointing to the exact recordings, like, for example. And then ultimately the third part is those actions part. So one, either can we provide more relevance recommendations for you, or even how can we make that recommendation process? So going from what I should be doing to then actually implementing that, how can we make that process even easier as well? So again, I think we're still in the early innings of what is possible with Copilot and Clarity. And I'd also love to hear from any of you if you have any interesting use cases or interesting challenges when it comes to conversion rate optimization or anything related to digital marketing that you think would be interesting for Clarity as well. And then finally, just a question that we get a ton is about kind of data privacy and how can you use Clarity in a compliant way. And so the big feature here is just data masking. And so this will enable you to really prioritize your users' privacy. And so what masking means is that for certain elements on the website, given a form input field or any website element, honestly, we can prevent the collection of data here from the client side. And so you can either do this manually by signaling to Clarity which specific elements you would like to mask, or to make it even easier, there are a few masking modes within Clarity. So we have relaxed, balanced, and strict. And so you can customize this as well to really fit the needs of what your users and what your project needs. But yeah, that's just a quick overview of Clarity, and happy to answer any follow-up questions.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. We've got a few questions coming in. One of them is, can Clarity handle interactive elements such as tracking clicks on drop-down menus?
Yes. So we actually have a live extension for Clarity, which you can download for Chrome and for Edge. And so what this allows you to do is actually navigate your site live as you normally would. And then once you get to a particular state, you can then generate a heat map for that. So for example, say there's a drop down on your website, you can navigate to that part as you normally would, click heat map, and then the heat map for that will generate, including data on that dropdown. So yes, that's important.
Yeah, thank you. And another from Rob, how do I remove a cookie banner or pop-up from view?
How do you remove cookie banner?
Yeah, it says, how do I
Yeah.
remove? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Rob, if you
So
want to. Yeah.
yeah, so within Clarity, you can choose different screenshots. So say, for example, you generate a heat map, but you see that cookie banner in the heat map itself. You can actually change the screenshot um, for a given URL. And then from there, you'll be able to find a different screenshot that hopefully doesn't have um, that cookie banner on it.
Yeah. Cool. And from John's asking, Clarity is a great tool, including Microsoft investing a lot in building it, enhancing it because it's free forever. Just thank you. I'm nervous Microsoft might pull the plug in the future. Can you comment on Microsoft's commercial logic for your investment in Clarity?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and about the future, if it's sustainable, etc.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I mean, it's very similar to Google Analytics. That's been a product that's been around for a while. It's a free product to use as well. And so the same, I guess, business justification for GA being free forever is the same for Clarity as well. So there are no plans to make Clarity paid, for example, or deprecate Clarity. Like Clarity is free for the long term, and we'll be around for a while.
Yeah. And I guess the follow up is, will it continue to be free with all the new AI features?
Yes. Yep. There's no tiers again. There's one level of clarity for everybody, and that includes all the new features that we're shipping.
Yeah. Cool. And can anything in an iframe be tracked?
Um, yes, I believe so. Again, I think sometimes they're automatically masked, but you can selectively unmask as well.
And what percentage of all sessions does Clarity record?
So we don't sample at all. So should be as close to 100%, if not 100%.
Yeah.
Like sometimes there is, like for whatever reason, maybe a single session if it's not formatted or things of that sort. But we don't like actively sample.
And how long do you store the recordings?
So we keep the dashboard information for 13 months. That also includes heat maps, and then the recordings we have for 30 days.
Okay. So you'll be able to look at the last 30 days of recordings, basically.
Correct.
Cool. Yeah. And this is good. What are the benefits of integration with Google Analytics? And I guess, can you, because you've also just recently integrated with Google Ads, and
Yeah.
I believe, yeah, if maybe talk around that a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think for us, we view the tools as having like our core use cases are slightly different, right? Like GA is still very much like the product, the traffic analytics. Clarity, we started out as behavioral analytics, and that's still definitely a focus. And so we actually see the tools as complementary, where if you integrate your GA property with Clarity, you can then view your GA data within the Clarity portal itself, and then actually view heat maps recordings on that GA data. And so we find it a way just to almost provide more benefit to the users without having you to jump around between both products. You can just stick in one, stick in Clarity, and get the benefits of both. And then when it comes to ads, similar thing. Like a lot of advertisers use Clarity, right? And they want to see once users get to my landing page or my site, how do they go through that conversion funnel? Where do they drop off? Where are the user frustrations? And so with this ads integration, all we're really doing is just allowing you to then tie back those user flows to specific campaigns, and again show you that campaign information to you within Clarity, so there's like that one source of truth, and you can compare, let's say, a campaign that's performing poorly versus a campaign that's performing better, and try to see how did the user behaviors, how are they different between those two campaigns. Was there anything that can be changed? And so that's kind of the whole thought process behind it, is just providing more value to users in a way that's simpler. And so yeah, when it comes to ads, we've started out with Google Ads, and then we're looking to kind of bring in more platforms down the line.
Yeah, this might be a good time. We've got our web developer on the call, Živko, because we use Clarity and have used it for quite a while on both our website and inside of our platform, Diginius Insight. And maybe Živko, if you can maybe talk a little bit about how you use it, what you see, what actions we take, etc.
Certainly, certainly. Thank you, Nate. So, me as a web developer, I use Microsoft Clarity to understand how users interact with our website. One of the main features that I use is the session recordings, which let us watch how users navigate the website, but also it allows you to pinpoint where the JavaScript errors have occurred. I'm not sure how many developers we have here, but identifying JavaScript errors is essential. So that's one of the main features that me personally, as a web developer, use. Of course, we also use the heat maps to identify where users click, where they scroll, and which elements they engage most with, which helps us obviously to identify what works and what doesn't work. Another cool feature that we also use is the path analysis feature, where we can actually look at the user's journey, and we can spot bottlenecks in the pages that cause users to drop off. And yes, Clarity is not just about, of course, identifying problems. It's about creating a better user experience. So looking into Clarity is essential for us.
Yeah, I think we use it for that kind of stuff more than like GA4 and so forth, because it really gets into how you can solve, like when you're sending a lot of traffic to sites and where users are dropping off or frustrated and whatever, you solve those and you just see the revenue go up. Cool. We have another question. Can we integrate with Shopify in order to get more information about conversion value?
Mm-hmm. So we are currently, I believe we had one in terms of like installation. And then we're actually looking into bringing in more Shopify information or e-commerce information more generally into Clarity. So right now we actually have, if you're an e-commerce site and you use Clarity and we detect that purchases are occurring, there's a new card that will show up, which is essentially showing what's the percentage of sessions that resulted in a purchase. And then from there, you can add that as a filter and view recordings and heat maps for purchase sessions. So that's like, I guess, the first step of expanding Clarity information for e-commerce specifically. But we are looking into doing that on a broader scale because we obviously know that the e-commerce purchase funnel is like the classic funnel optimization. And so that's definitely an area that we're looking into as well.
Yeah. And how do you manage bot traffic or scrapers influencing the data?
Yeah. So we have almost a whole team dedicated to like detecting bots. And so we have had this from the start. So if you're on the Clarity homepage, you'll notice that there's a small section that says, how many bots are excluded from this traffic. And so we already do that already. And then a new feature we'll be launching soon is going into more detail about this bot traffic. So more specifically, kind of what kind of bots are they as well, to help you see what the breakdown of that is. So yeah, that's coming soon. And yeah, we're always working in the background to increase our bot detection capabilities as well.
I mean, from an advertising perspective, is it possible to kind of match back bots to advertising clicks that were purchased with Clarity?
So yeah, I mean, I don't know if we'll be able to actually, make that specific connection, but through, I guess, filtering, you can see essentially for, let's say, a given campaign, what was the bot traffic for that campaign versus a different campaign, right? If you see a big spike in bot traffic from, I don't know, a Google ad versus a Facebook ad, right? Then there's something to look into there. Like why there's so many bots from Facebook versus Google. Maybe that's something to look into.
Yeah. And one of the things we noticed was the AI. This is a question here about, have you got any case studies of things companies have done off the back of the AI notes that have been big wins? Because we've been seeing that too. It's kind of nice to get, hey, here's all the things, and then here's commentary about what you might be able to take as actions. But
Yeah, yeah, and that goes back to that Gym Geek example, right? Like those improvements that they made were 100% suggested from those insights, um, and then they just implemented them, validated with the heat maps, and saw that big improvement. And so that was, at our V1 of our insights features, and so as we build out more capabilities, V2, V3 down the line, we're excited to see how much more value can be added to users of Clarity through this.
yeah. And another one, is it possible to run A/B tests in Clarity? And are there any integrations of the tools necessary for this?
Yeah, so we do have integrations with AB Tasty and Chameleon, I believe is how you pronounce it. Um, but then there's also, we have something called custom tags within Clarity. So you can actually send us through like the site itself, like, hey, this is variant A, this is variant B. Um, and then within Clarity, in the filters dropdown, you can filter your information by, custom tag, and then just compare heat maps, for example, of, the variant A versus variant B. What was the user behavior? How do the interactions change from variant to variant? So that's something that is supported currently.
Cool. It says, are there any plans for the Copilot feature to summarize more than 10 recordings, as it takes a long time to manually click through more
Yeah.
than 10? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something we're working on in the near future as well. Because if you notice, you can actually select more than 10, and so now we're just kind of making sure we have the capacity and figuring out how that's going to work on the back end in terms of supporting a larger amount. But we can do that, and so now just figuring out what that right amount is off the get go.
Cool. And I'll probably answer this one, but we'll see. Can Copilot get its suggestions analysis wrong, like how AI ChatGPT can get things wrong? I assume it's always possible to get things wrong, which is why you need a good
Yeah,
analyst. Yeah.
yeah. I feel like it's good practice with any AI tool to always have like a way to verify what is being said. And so that's something that we're actually doing with Clarity already. For example, for those recording insights, we'll link to the actual recordings themselves so you can go in, verify what is happening, same for heat maps as well. And then in our chat experience, we will actually let you add the filters that were called out in the chat responses to the actual dashboard again, so you can verify that the information that is being outputted is real information as well. And so that's definitely very important, obviously, because these models can always hallucinate, but really grounding the responses in the core information, so linking them to the databases, as well as providing ways for users to actually go in the extra step if they want to and verify this information, is something that we're doing within Clarity.
Yeah. Cool. Here's when I look at CRO for clients, I always mention Clarity first. It's amazing. What has been the most common feedback from companies using the tool?
I think like in terms of what's working well is just going back to why they're using Clarity in the first place, like really seeing the user behavior, really understanding what is occurring, not just I see a number go up and down. Like these customers, these users really love that ability. And then I think something that's we've gotten feedback on that we're again actively working on is almost this insights aspect of Clarity, or taking all this information and then without you having to go in and make multiple comparisons, add multiple filters, trying to do all this analysis, like really doing this analysis for the user. So that way you can imagine you just go to Clarity and almost saying, okay, what what should I care about? What should I look at, what is mattering the most over the past week, and then have clarity just give you those for you.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
mean,
kind of the next step.
yeah, I would personally recommend putting it as part of the infrastructure. Like if you're
Yeah.
running advertising for a company, you want to have your analytics, which is like, GA4 or whatever's used, and then you have all your different ad things. And then if you put clarity in as well, then you've got another view to see it. So if the client comes and says, why is it performing or what's it? And then you can go and say, well, we've got these issues on your website. If you fix those issues on the website, then the traffic should perform a lot better. Or it just gives a whole nother analysis that a lot of the analytics don't. And we've seen some pretty significant problems on different sites that through clarity that you don't see in other ways, that that really help on that. Another question, is there a way to get or store recordings for longer than 30 days? Like, can you export them or?
So if you favorite a recording, I believe we hold onto that for 12 months. I'll double check. Um, but obviously that's limited to just how many you can favorite. Um, but in terms of download, you can download recordings as like a video file, but you're able to download like the dashboard information or the heat maps both as like a image file, or as like a CSV Excel sheet. You can do that as well. But when it comes to recordings, those, because it's more visual in nature, that is boxed into the Clarity portal itself.
Yeah. And I guess one question, look, do you know if the instructions on adding code on Shopify are still accurate? Because it sounds like there may have been changes on the Shopify platform for pixel code deployment.
Yeah, I know that there were recent changes to like Shopify when it comes to like the checkout pages more generally. I can double check on the actual installation portion. I personally haven't heard anything, but if this person's saying that something needs to be looked at, then I'll definitely take a look as well.
Yeah, so that was Doug. So we can get a few of those
Okay.
questions and send them to you, and then get them
Yeah,
answered and
yeah,
distributed. Yeah.
that'd be great.
Um, any specific advice if you're looking at average order value in particular, um, about possible ways to use Clarity to improve that?
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of getting the actual number itself, that is something that we're looking to, again, with these expanded e-commerce metrics.
Hmm.
Um, but when it just comes to, well, how do you increase average order value in general, maybe that's, adding some product upsells, or some better recommendations. That's something that you can look at with Clarity, right? So, if you have, this can go back to A/B testing, right? So you have a variant that doesn't have whatever form of upsell variant that does, and then can tie back how does the user behavior between those two variants differ? Like, are there a lot more clicks and a lot more engagement on those upsells? That can be an indication that, hey, this is a good way to increase average order value, right? So thinking more so from the user behavior perspective on what do I want users to do to increase the AOV? That's something that you can use Clarity for right now.
Okay. And is it able to filter like organic traffic versus paid traffic?
So that's where this integration with the ads will come into play, where you can then add sessions from given campaigns together, and group those as paid traffic versus organic traffic. We also have I guess more of a UTM based card already, so you can see your breakdown in traffic by channel or source or refer traffic, and those will break down. Was it direct or did it come from Google search or did it come from Facebook or whatever. So there are other ways in which you can do that as well.
Yeah. Okay. And here's one. Copilot session insights use words like some and several when describing user actions and behavior. Is there any way to find the actual numbers involved with those insights so they can know if they're basing the decisions on a statistically significant data set?
Hmm. So it's, I guess, would be based off of how many sessions that are selected in that group, right? So if it's 10 sessions, then it'll be less than 10 would be grouped under there. So that's currently what's supported right now, but that is actually good feedback. Can we be more specific on what that number is? We're currently looking at improving, again, for V2 of the session recordings, heat map insights and chat. So actually going to write that one down. Because I think that's actually
that would probably be good because and then one question: how does the implementation of Clarity affect the loading speed of a website?
Yeah, so it shouldn't have any effect on page load speed at all. Um, you can verify it if you're really curious. And we have a whole blog on this as well that I can share with you, Nate, and then maybe after the fact can send out to everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, it shouldn't be any noticeable effect on page load speed.
Yeah. And the question about, can you track mouse shaking, like a frustration signal for users or when they're bored or while something loads or something like that?
Hmm. That is not currently a like quote unquote behavioral metric in which like you can almost quantify that. Um, but if you see it in recordings, for example, you'll be able to see the mouse kind of squiggling around.
Yeah.
But again, that's a good signal to bring back to the team.
Cool. And then do you have any information about the new cookie consent requirements for users in EEA, UK, Switzerland, etc., and or how to implement?
Yeah, I know that we had sent out an email about that last week or a bit longer than that. And yeah, we've gotten a ton of feedback on kind of what the next step should be. So I believe the team is kind of taking all these different perspectives into account, and then we'll be sending out like a more formal response of like what actually needs to be done coming soon. So again, once that comes out, I'll share that with you, Nate, and then you can send that out to everybody too.
Yeah. And in like data masking for privacy compliance, how is Clarity's data gathering impacted by cookies?
So I mean, it functions similarly to GA. I would say in terms of like cookies is essentially just stitching together sessions, right? So one, I guess one piece of information we have in Clarity is like the new versus the returning user, right? It's like if there's cookies, then you know if this is a returning versus a new user. If you don't have cookies, then they would just always come up as a new user. So things like that, where it's more like continuity for a user's, let's say, history on Clarity.
Yeah, cool. I think that's most of the questions that have been asked. Would anybody like to raise their hand or unmute and ask any other questions that they're thinking of? Cool. Oh wait, here's another follow-up here. A couple more. So, is there an API to get data?
Yes. So we have a data export API, which lets you kind of programmatically retrieve the dashboard information. So if you want to pull that out of Clarity and then put that into another visualization tool that you use, you can do that. And that's for the dashboard information specifically.
Okay. And then back to this cookie question. One, if the user does not consent to cookies, will Clarity collect any data?
Um, I know we have specific documentation on what is and isn't collected. Um, I'm not 100% sure on exactly what we will in that scenario. So I will refer back to like the doc that we have, and then I can send it over to you, Nate, as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I guess you can do things even without cookies that wouldn't impact cookies, right? So
Right.
that's probably a bit technical. Yeah. Okay. And how accurate is the user intent tracking suggestions on the platform? I mean, it's hard
So
to
that's
say,
it.
right?
Yeah, it's based off of various signals like time spent or number of clicks or conversions. Um, so, I mean, within the confines of how we define user intent, I would say it's accurate.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, I think that pretty much uses up the time. Thank you a lot, Colin, for joining. We will send out the recording and we'll follow up with a few questions. And if anybody has any others I didn't think of, feel free to email them and we'll look to see what answers we can find. And yeah, good luck with Clarity. And any questions you have on Microsoft Advertising, just let any of the team know at Diginius. And yeah, thank you for joining us. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.